Me or only the
Good
presentation?
afternoon and welcome to the Eco Atlantic Oil and Gas Limited investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted anytime by the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all the questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Gil Hosman, President and CEO. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, Alessandro, and good afternoon to the UK crowd that joined us, and good morning to the North Americans, and if there are people from other parts of the world, then good evening, good morning, good night. Thank you for coming. I assume that most of you, if not all of you, know Eco Atlantic. In a nutshell, Eco Atlantic is a high impact exploration company in the best oil basins around the world. Our portfolio stretches into the three most exciting basins for oil exploration around the world. I will touch base in a minute. I kindly ask everyone to read the disclaimer. I'm sure you know it by heart by now. Before I enter into the actual operations and financials of the company, just wanted to highlight the strong board and management team that we have, comprised of highly technical people such as Selma Osiku from Namibia. She's a geologist. We have people like Keith Hill, obviously the former CEO of Africa Oil, who sits on our board for the past 7 years. We have financial people such as Ellen Friedman from Toronto. He's a banker. We have Gadi Levine as our CFO, and obviously the guys who are running the company on the day-to-day, myself, Colin Kinley, our Chief Operating Officer, and Alice Carroll. In terms of our portfolio, probably aware we have 8 blocks, stretches around across 3 hotspot basins around the world. On the left-hand side, we have an exposure to 2 blocks in Guyana, in particular the Orindwick block, where we currently hold the 100% working interest. This is directly adjacent to the prolific Stabroek block, where Exxon have made more than 11 billion barrels worth of discoveries. They are now preparing for the 7th development, which is Hammerhead, which actually has a small part that extends into our block. I will speak about it a bit later. In terms of our block in Guyana, we drilled 2 wells there back in 2019 with 2 discoveries, albeit heavy oil, somewhere between 14 to 18 API. We will speak about it in a moment. And we have some exposure to the Kanji block through our shareholding in a private company named JHI, where we drilled together with them, and Exxon drilled 2 wells back in 2020 and back in 2021. In the middle, South Africa, Orange Basin, the hottest basin in the exploration world right now. We have 2 very large blocks in the South African side of the Orange Basin, right on the border with Namibia. We have block number 1, which stretches basically from the shore and all the way into the deeper water section of the basin. On the east side, we can see some gas prospects. On the west side, we can see some oil prospects that communicate very well with the latest Graf and Mopani discoveries made on the Namibian side of the basin. Important to note that 70% of the Orange Basin lies in South African waters, where, as I said, we have 2 blocks, Block 1 and obviously Block 3B4B, which is right on trend with the Venus and Graf discoveries, where we recently found out a portion of the block to Total and Qatar. Total will become the operator in the next few weeks, and we'll start the preparations and planning for the proposed drilling in the next season. On the right-hand side, we have the Namibian blocks in the Wallabies Basin. Wallabies Basin was considered to be the oil-prone basin of Namibia, with a light oil discovery or light oil recovery of light oil back in 2013 in the Winget 1 well, which lies in the middle of the basin. We have our 4 blocks surrounding this so-called technical discovery that proved that the source rock is there. And recently, as everyone probably knows, Chevron farmed into the central block there, where Winget 1 was drilled, right in the center of our 4 blocks, and we have an active farm out process going on there. So these are our 8 blocks, 4 in Wallace Basin, Namibia, 2 very large blocks in South Africa, Orange Basin, 1 block where we operate 100% in Guyana, and another block that we have exposure to. In terms of the reason why we are meeting here, it's, from time to time, we'd like to give an update, a direct update to our shareholders, not through regulatory news or not through all kind of announcement, but actually meeting our investors, speaking with them. Our annual results were published this morning, which was filed last night in Canada. And in terms of our financial, we had around $3 million or $2.9 million with 0 debt as of 31st of March 2024. Obviously, that was 5 months ago or 4 months ago. At the moment, our cash position is around $1.5 million. We made a very significant reduction in our G&A, in our professional fees and operating expenses throughout this period, in order to get to a point that when we receive the money from the farm out we announced in March, we still have money in order to maintain the company and keep on the operations in an orderly manner. In terms of the cash position, we will have around $10 million in a month from now. We are expecting to close the farm out deal and complete it with Total and Qatar during the month of August. That's the current plan with all the parties involved, where we will receive $8.3 million coming from all kind of sources, from all kind of deals, from Africa Oil, from Total, from Qatar, and from our block partners for previous carry that we carry them. So we're going to have around $10 million at the end of August, with very limited, if at all, commitment and expenses going forward. Block 3B/4B will be fully carried going forward, and we are planning to imitate the same on other blocks as well. Just yesterday, we announced a very interesting deal, a great deal for Echo, actually, I would say amazing deal for Echo, where we managed to agree, we offered and we managed to agree with Africa Oil, that was contemplating to sell their position in the past few months, because they're restructuring their own company. They were contemplating to sell their position in Echo Atlantic. They're no longer too much interested in exploration. They are more focused on Nigerian production. And instead of them selling an overhang of 16% of the share count in the market, we simply told them, listen, why don't we simply swap 16% of the company into a direct 16% of what we have in South Africa. And we agreed that we will transfer basically 1% of our holdings in Block 3B/4B in return for them surrendering all their shares and warrants amount to 16% of the company. That was agreed and signed and announced yesterday. They are now in a lockup period until this completes in the next few months, and therefore we eliminated the overhang. We don't expect any share of Africa Oil to be sold in the market. They actually cannot do it. And basically, it was for us, it was a zero-sum game. Instead of having a 16% big shareholder, they were the biggest shareholder, and indirect 1% in Block 3B/4B, we simply swapped it for 1% in Block 3B/4B against their 16% holding in the company. And we didn't offer and didn't agree to give any other parts or portions of our remaining licenses, simply because all of them at the moment are in the middle of farm out discussions, and obviously it would have created some distraction and would have created some complexity. So the deal was agreed, only 1% in Block 3B/4B in return for canceling all their shares, 16% of Echo Atlantic. The deal, as of 2 days ago, was worth around exactly 11.5 million Canadian dollars or $8.5 million US. That gives a valuation for the block 3B/4B, basically, if you multiply it by 100, of $850 million valuation for the block, in which we still hold 5.25% fully carried going forward. That gives you a very nice piece of valuation for only this piece of of the business or this piece of the asset, how much it's worth. In terms of our unique positioning in Guyana and Suriname, Guyana, Suriname, and Orange Basin, just to give you a sense of a comparison, on the left-hand side, this is to scale. This is the Orindwik block and the Stabroek block in Guyana, and this is to scale against the Orange Basin. The Orange Basin is the last huge oil-prone delta in the world. It's a huge basin, as you can see. This is the entire Guyana Suriname basin on the left-hand side, and this is the Orange Basin, Namibia and South Africa on the right-hand side, where we are the owners, the proud owners of two very significant blocks. So in Orindwik, as you know, we now hold 100% of the block, and in Block 3B4B, we announced the farm-out deal. And we recently acquired Block 1, as I stated. We're now in the process of getting the requisite approvals from the government and to become the operator with 75% working interest. As I said, we see a lot of gas leads and prospects on the east side and oil leads and prospects on the deeper water section of the block. And going forward, we don't have any near-term commitment. The block is fully covered by 2D and 3D. Which we will start to analyze, and I only assume that as in the rest of our portfolio, it will be subject to a farm out in the coming years to come. In terms of our Wallabies Basin, as I said, we have the biggest acreage position in Wallabies Basin in Namibia. This is becoming an ever more interesting basin that people are looking for, backed on the recent Chevron entry into the middle of the basin, where 4 blocks actually surrounding it, with the understanding that oil is probably to be found in Namibia in the deeper water sections. We have 2 blocks, the Guy license and the Tamar license, on the deeper water section of the basin. Where we see most of the prospects and leads that could host big reservoirs. And I don't know if anyone followed, ExxonMobil have recently, a week ago, mobilized a rig from Angola down to Namib Basin to drill a well where it says Exxon, so north of our Cooper block. And so there's a lot to be expect from the Exxon exploration well in the months to come. In the Orange Basin, as I said, just look at the names that are surrounding us. We have Total and Qatar in our Block 3B4B. We have Block 1 right next to Shell and Qatar, Graf and Yonker discoveries. Total is there with Venus. We have Rhino that recently, right next to us, that recently was found in by Azul. Azul is a joint venture company between BP and Eni. And we have Chevron to the north there, and obviously Galp with the huge Mopani discovery that is currently getting offers from super majors to come in and operate. Just the map of activity, and this can be found on our website. I don't want to go into too many details. You have 10 events, 10 blocks that are subject to a lot of activity, be it farm outs and exploration. To those of you who follow the story closely, Total yesterday announced that they are relinquishing Block 11B12B, which is in a complete different basin in South Africa, but also relinquishing Block 567 right to the south of us, in order to focus on the 2 blocks that they have on 3B4B and DWOB. So they relinquish Block 567 to the south of Block 3B4B. 567, by the way, is not in the Orange Basin. Is more in the Cape Town Basin, if you like. It's right next to Cape Town. They relinquished this block. They left this block yesterday in order to focus on their drilling campaign on Block 3B4B and on Block DWOB, what's here marked number 2, Deepwater Orange Basin, where in total they plan around 8 to 9 wells to be drilled in the next few years. again, this can be found on our website, so easy to follow. Guyana, for those of you who follow the story, we have the Orindwi block now owned 100% by us. We're holding 60% of the block under a separate entity, which we bought from Tullow when they decided to leave exploration altogether. And we have 40% working percent in the original entity that we had in Guyana. We have an obligation to drill a well to spud a well by January 2026, so basically during 2025. We have identified the target that we want to drill, and we are currently actively in a process of bringing in a partner to help us drill the well. Most probably, we will not drill a well 100%. We will not drill a well 100% on our sole risk. So we will bring in a partner to drill in with us. A part of the Cretaceous light oil target that we are targeting around 800 million barrels in total. We also have, as a bonus for a farm-in, we have the 2 heavy oil discoveries that are still there, still under our names. Mainly the Jeffro one, which has around 1 billion barrels of oil in place. Again, heavy, but still oil. And there's a lot of demand for heavy oil, especially these days when Venezuela is sanctioned. We have another small bonus, which is the extension of Hammerhead, which is the 7th development project of Exxon in the Stubble block. That part of it stretches into our block. There's a clear unitization legalization in Guyana when the time comes. It's very clear under the petroleum agreements. It's very clear under the legislation. But again, this is Exxon just announced just a few weeks ago that they're going to develop it. It's very good news for us in any case, because first of all, it's a heavy oil development. And second, as I said, a bit of it or a piece of it stretches into our block. And I believe it will be a subject to further discussions with the government and with the stakeholders going forward. This is basically what we are targeting. You can see in this map, again, this can be found on our website. You can see the Liza's deep discoveries on the right-hand side. You can see the Hammerhead discovery, which is the green one that actually stretches into our block at a certain point. And we are targeting upper Cretaceous and lower Cretaceous targets in the next drilling campaign during 2025, probably the Ayatuk prospect, which is a stack prospect of Orituk, Mako, and Ayatuk, but we call it Ayatuk. To the left-hand side, you can see the Jeffro discovery, the Joe discovery, and even further beyond the Karapa discovery on the Kanuku block, which was made by Tullow and Repsol back in 2019, I think. Yeah. In terms of Namibia, again, as I said, we have a very significant position. Maybe it's the highlights of it. First of all, it's a huge acreage, around 30,000 square kilometers. We are the operator of all the 4 blocks. We have 85% working interest in all the 4 blocks, with 10% NAMCOR and 5% a local partner, a different local partner in each block. Having 85% working interest allows us to offer a nice piece of working interest to a potential farm-in, as well as operatorship if someone likes it. And without entering into too many details, I can tell you that since Chevron farmed into the basin and there's a rush into Namibia regardless, Orange Basin is fully taken. We have many companies interested, knocking on our doors, looking at our Namibian acreage and considering a farming. To finalize, we are expecting a very high level of activity in the next 18 months. In South Africa, we expect to close the deal with Total and Qatar next month, during August. Total will assume operatorship and will start planning and preparations for the wells. Obviously, they came in to drill wells, and they are highly motivated to drill the wells once all the permits are in place and the process is followed carefully. We think and hope that 2025 is the year of them drilling the 2 wells. One is fully committed, the other one is obviously contingent, but we think 2025 will be the year of them drilling the wells on our Block 3B/4B. In Guyana, in Orindwick, as I said, we just closed the Tullow transaction. We are 100% owner. We own the data. We own the heavy oil discoveries. We own the companies. We are in an active farm-out process. Obviously, we will not announce anything until something is signed and when signed. So I cannot elaborate too much, especially because we are under very strict confidentiality. But we have an active process, an active data room. Few companies are assessing the data, assessing the heavy oil discoveries, and obviously assessing the target that we want to drill into, as well as the commercial terms and the fiscal terms, which are the best to be found in Guyana. In South Africa, Block 1, we recently applied for Section 11, meaning to become the operator and the owner of the block. I think that by the end of the year, or even before, we will become the operator, official operator. Then we will start our technical evaluation, and we'll probably attract additional big companies to come in and explore with us. As I said, 2D and 3D are there, existing. We just need to analyze, to select targets, and move forward. On the one hand, there's no commitment not to shoot seismic and not to drill. On the other hand, we think we can fast track the entire process. In Guyana, in Kanji, again, we have a very small indirect interest. Exxon, if they decide to drill, great, it will give us another catalyst. We don't know. We don't have visibility to the Exxon plans with respect to Kanji block. But as I said, we have an investment in there we made back in 2020. And if they will drill a well, obviously it will have an impact on us. And in Namibia, other than doing some structural report on the entire basin at the moment for the ministry and for ourselves, obviously, we are in an active farm-out mode. We speak with a lot of companies, or many companies at the moment. There's a keen interest for many big oil companies to come into Namibia and explore. And I hope and believe that by the end of the year, we will be able to announce a farming deal in our Namibian blocks. I think basically this is it for those who wanted additional information about the company.
Perfect. Gil, thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Gil takes a few moments to review the questions that have been submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. As you can see, we have received a number of questions throughout today's presentation. And Gil, if I could just ask you to read out the questions and give responses where it is appropriate to do so, I'll pick up from you at the end.
All right, let me read the questions here. How far on is the environmental impact studies and paperwork required to drill in Block 3B/4B, and what is the earliest possible date to drill? Okay. There's a very defined procedure in South Africa in order to obtain an environmental permit to drill. The reason we know it, other than, of course, that we have a stake in Block 3B/4B, is because we were the first company to drill in the Orange Basin in the new era of the Orange Basin just 2 years ago. So we went through this process and we proved to everyone that a well can be drilled offshore South Africa with no interruptions. And the reason we managed to drill a well, the Gazania one well that we drilled in 2022, sorry, is because we followed this very strict procedure of obtaining environmental permit, which requires studies, which required community consulting, etc. And that's exactly what we did this time. We did it for almost 12 months. With 3 community engagement rounds, with a lot of environmental assessment, etc. And eventually we submitted, on behalf of the joint venture partners, Africa Oil submitted the environmental impact assessment survey to be approved for drilling in May 2024. Now, according to the legislation in South Africa, there's some time frames that needs to be followed. There's 90 days for review, and then there's 20 days for signature, and then 180 days for public appeals, if any, etc. So we believe that the entire process should take around by the end of the year, so roughly 8 to 9 months. So we hope and believe that by the end of this year, early beginning of next Q1 25, we will get the final environmental green light to go ahead and drill. Then, obviously, there will be a permit to drill, and Total intention is to go ahead and drill. In parallel to the EIA process, the approval process that is run by the government, because we submitted everything, once Total will assume operatorship at the end of August, they will start their own planning and their own preparations to drill in parallel to the EIA being progressed. So in terms of the question, what is the earliest possible date for drill? As I said, Q1 25 is the date that we expect to get the final permit. In parallel, Total will start their planning. I cannot give you a date, and I cannot give you a firm date at the moment for the well to be spud, but that's the plan. And as I said, we hope and we believe that the first well will be drilled in the first half of 2025. What is the closing date for offers to farm into Orindwick? There's no closing date. It's an open process, and at the end of the day, if the first comes, first serve. If one of the, I wouldn't say the number, but one of the few companies that are currently very much active in the data room and discussing with us, we have an open discussion with the companies about fiscal terms, about commercial terms, about what is our expectations, what is their expectation, risk, reward, etc., etc. And these big companies, they take time for decisions. The guys that you speak with are not the guys who give the authority eventually. You know how it is, reporting rules, etc. Once a binding bid will come in and we will find it to our liking, we will start negotiations, obviously. These type of things takes time, okay? Just, with Total in Qatar, it took us almost a year since we started the discussion until we closed the deal, or not closed, until we signed the agreement. It takes time. The good thing is that we have time. Well, now in July 24, we need to drill by the end of 25. So we are getting close to a date. Some people ask for extension, but we are getting close to a date where we will receive, hopefully, a bid that will make sense. And then it's negotiation time, etc. So there's no end date. And in terms of our reporting or us announcing to the market, we will probably be only announced when a firm deal is signed, and then we will announce it. We are very hopeful, and that's our plan, that it will still happen, obviously, this year. How many wells do you expect Echo will have an interest in that will be drilled in 2025? Do you expect? All right, I just spoke about Orange Basin Block 3B/4B. We expect at least one well to be drilled in 2025, maybe immediately after the discovery, a follow-up well. So we might see 2 wells in 2025 on our Block 3B/4B, assuming environmental permit is in place and no hiccups and no stoppage from whatever. So 2 wells, hopefully up to 2 wells in 2025 in Block 3B/4B. If we manage to close a farm out deal in Guyana, we need to drill in 2025. So whomever comes in knows that we are drilling in 2025. The target is identified. We already discussed a potential rig. There are many rigs available in the area currently being used by Exxon, but we can find a slot for ourselves. So if we have a good farming deal, or if we have a farming deal in Guyana, we will drill in 2025. That makes it a potential 3rd well. What we cannot answer is whether or not Exxon will drill on Kanji. and it might happen because we're not aware of their plans. But if they will decide to drill on Kanji block in Guyana, then that means that we'll have another potential well that we have an exposure to. But in terms of our real portfolio, a well or two in 25 is expected, again, with no hiccups, expected in South Africa. And if we have a farming deal, then a well in Guyana. Block 1 seems to be in the heart of the Orange Basin, next door to Rhino, which recently announced a 10-well drilling campaign, correct? What prospectivity do you see there, and how much, if it is covered by 3D? We have more than, I think, 6,000 square kilometers of 3D on this block, and 5,000 line kilometers of 2D. It's covered with a lot of data. And yes, it's in the heart of the Orange Basin. They call it Block 1 because this is how they start counting. 1 is on the border with Namibia, 2 is a bit south of it, 3 before is a bit south of it. But we call it Block 1 because we think it's block number 1 there. We see a lot of prospectivity on the east side for gas, which is being monetized in the area as we speak. Kudu is under development, and we know that there's a lot of associated gas in Venus and other discoveries there. So it will be eventually there will be some type of a gas development in the area. Obviously, the entire region is hungry for energy resources for gas. So we see gas prospectivity on the east side. We see a lot of oil prospectivity on the west side. We only started the analysis. The data exists. Once we become operator, that's the thing we would like to focus on. Is it possible that you will? Sorry. Let me see. Sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses. It looks like that with the farm out with Chevron, you obtained a royalty on the future of the well. Is this the future strategy? I'm not sure I'm understanding this question because we didn't farm out to Chevron. Sorry, I cannot answer this because I don't understand the question. We didn't farm out to Chevron, and I'm not sure what obtained royalty. Let's see if there are any other questions. Is it possible that you will sell the whole block in Guyana or Rindwick and not farm it out? Didn't cross my mind, but we are a business-oriented company, and our only goal in life is to create shareholders value. And if someone comes in and say, listen, I don't want you there, I want to buy the block for whatever, and it will make sense, and the board will decide that it creates value for our shareholders, I cannot dismiss this possibility. I must admit, I didn't think of it, and I don't see anyone. Why would anyone come and simply buy us out without leaving us a small piece that we are asking for? But again, if a deal comes along and it makes sense for our shareholders, and we create value, and we can return money into their pockets, the board will decide. The board will discuss, and if it makes good sense, I'm open for everything. I think that's it. I don't see any other.
Perfect, Gil. Thank you very much for answering those questions you can from investors. Of course, the company can review all the questions submitted today, and we'll publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company, Gil, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
As I said, we are considered to be one of the most, if not the most exciting pure play exploration company. We have our hands and legs and our hearts in the best prolific oil exploration basins around the world, Orange, Guyana, and Wallabies in Namibia. We have many catalysts planned for the next 18 months, starting in few weeks and stretching all across 2025. Come join us for the ride.
Perfect, Gil. Thank you once again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Eco Atlantic Oil and Gas Limited, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.